All right, good afternoon. I'm Dave Shallenberger. Nice. This was a great lead into you've had Meteorology 101. Now we're going to see that meteorology put in some of the Weather Service products. So going to give this a try. Okay. Am I pointing the right way? Okay. Next slide, please. Just want to give you a heads up of the Weather Service forecast areas. Pittsburgh being in Southwest Pennsylvania. You have Erie and Crawford County being covered by Cleveland, National Weather Service Cleveland. State College, of course, most of Central PA and Binghamton, New York, and Northeastern Pennsylvania, and of course, Philadelphia and Southeastern. So there's an idea of what Weather Service offices cover your area. Next slide, please. I just want to go over some of the products that we provide at the Weather Service office in Pittsburgh, and this is every Weather Service office as well. We're going to go over our fire weather forecast products, watches and warnings, of course, our spot weather forecasts and special weather statements, which is we're going to be using this for fire weather now, which is new for most of the area. And of course, the air quality alerts, this is mainly for Allegheny County, but we will disseminate those. And something I didn't put on here, and I apologize if there's any questions later, is exactly where to get these. And you can find all these products at weather.gov/PBZ for Pittsburgh. Okay. Next slide, please. So first things first, we'll go into our warning products. Generally, you're going to see a red flag warning situation, mainly about maybe once every 2 years in Pennsylvania. It's very rare. We actually had one this past fall, November 9th. I'm sure a few might have remembered that event. We had a really dry fall coming into the area, and mainly out of our forecast area was Ohio and West Virginia that requested red flag warnings. But generally we'll use a watch 1 to 2 days out, sometimes as close as 12 hours out. And then it'll be for when we expect conditions to have the low RHs, high wind speeds and the fuel moistures after coordination with state fire supervisors. So, and then the red flag warning, of course, when we're expecting critical fire weather conditions. Once again, I believe the last red flag warning issued here in Pennsylvania was all the way back in 2020. So it's a pretty rare situation to come up around here. Next slide, please. And here's some of our criteria expected. It can get a little bit wordy, but it's generally focused. It can be focused locally or in a region, and looking at low RH less than 30% and strong winds greater than 20 miles per hour for 2 hours or more. General Pennsylvania criteria for that. And then, of course, with we always collaborate with the state supervisors for fire weather, and they'll have the finger on the pulse, so to speak, for your fuel moistures, your 10-hour fuel moistures. Last three, generally not seeing that very often around Pennsylvania, dry lightning or first lightning in a little while. And of course, this is coordinated, but also as we've just experienced over the past couple of days, we have those strong wind shift events with cold fronts coming in. And we had a pretty significant one a couple of days yesterday, actually, with an easterly wind type event. We had southwest winds coming up over the mountains, and we actually had some gusts up to 50 miles an hour, even 60 over the Laurels at the time. So next slide, please. For our fire weather planning forecast, once again, can be found at our site, and it'll be under our fire weather forecasts. But this is more general of a larger area. You're looking at it issued twice a day between 12 and 2 p.m. and 3 and 5 a.m. During the fall and the spring, when we have rapidly changing conditions, we will update that more often. At least I encourage our forecasters to. And there's usually a narrative, and it's usually used for the beginning of the day, pre-suppression, initial attack, to manage daily staffing levels, and also for prevention. It does account for local topography, but to get your specific local terrain effects, you're going to want to issue a spot weather forecast. So next slide, please. And there's an example of it. Just to see here. Yeah, there we go. Just very simple cloud cover, precip type, chance of precipitation, the temperature trends, your winds expected, duration begin. Once again, the Haynes we included on there just because it's a National Weather Service directive, but it doesn't always work for everybody, of course. What I like to mention also is the ADI or dispersion index. So we include that now, which was a great lead in from Sean's presentation. Is we'll actually give you that forecast expected, giving you how great the air quality will be or how well the smoke will disperse. So next slide, please. And as I was mentioning earlier, we also have the spot weather forecast as being as prescribed burn council. This will be your product of choice most of the time, issued to fit that time or topography and weather of a specific location. So especially in the Pittsburgh area, we generally focus on those Laurels area, and in Fayette, Westmoreland, Indiana counties, we pay a particular attention there because that's where the most of our really heavy terrain is. Of course, we do have some interesting complex topography as you get into further southwest and south of Pittsburgh as well. Used for prescribed burns, and not just prescribed burns, spray projects, hazmat situations, when there's a gas emitted from a certain incident that happened, and other special projects as well. For instance, it can be used as a multifaceted tool. For instance, I had to issue a spot weather forecast in the mountains in West Virginia and Tucker County for search and rescue. So next slide, please. And here's an example of this product. It'll look like this. We always check the topography. We'll get a look at that. We can zoom in. Us as weather forecasters, we can use that topography to point out certain local terrain effects that may change on the wind. If there's any deep valleys, like for instance, we do have that problem with dispersion. There could be poor air quality, as mentioned before. And then up here, we'll give you a short duration, 12 hours. Most of the time it's tabular. You can change that to be more of a discussion type. But in the discussion area up here, I encourage my forecasters, being the fire weather program manager, I encourage them to add these additional information into the discussion. If you believe there's going to be an inversion break, usually what also lingers above those inversions is strong winds. That inversion will break, and then you'll have strong winds in the afternoon mixing down to the surface, and then it can really play havoc on your prescribed burn. So they'll mention that, and then also if there's any special terrain effects. A lot of times, like for instance, like we experienced yesterday with the gravity winds out of the southeast, they were very strong downslope winds coming off the eastern ranges. Also, if there's any gap winds or channeling effects with the general wind, we'll also mention that in there. So, and if you're looking for that, and if you have a specific location that you're beginning your ignition on, if you could provide that information, that's even more. Like in the feedback area, the more information you provide, or the more information you provide in the remarks right here, helps us out even more. Next slide, please. And there's an example at the bottom. At the bottom, a lot of times we will get a feedback or an observation of what you experienced. A lot of times where prescribed burns are taking place, they're in pretty remote areas a lot of times. So if you can provide some feedback there and tell us what you experienced there, or what went unexpectedly, we can only tailor our forecast, and we could be that much better. Next slide, please. Also, what tends to get included is a high split, and this is going to tell us where your smoke's going to blow or where it's going to go to. And also, you got two options there. You got a trajectory model that you can use or dispersion. I've had situations where they require both, because you're getting the direction of where your smoke's going to go to, and you're also getting how that's going to disperse as it goes along. If you have an idea of what kind of fuel you're going to be burning into, then we know how bad that is going to be. We can actually use that as a suggestion in the drop downs, or we can use a dispersion model that's similar to it. So what I did is that I just selected trajectory for now, and then I compute the forecast trajectories, select that. Next slide, please. And then, for instance, I used the State College area, and I used here on the right side, I used the trajectory matrix. I selected number 1. We're just going to do something normal, but say perhaps you're burning in 2 locations. You can actually have 2 different trajectories here, and it'll show you where that smoke's going to go. We select that, and then exactly where it's located, I chose State College and the model that we're going to use. And usually we're providing this, but I've had some folks that know enough about meteorology that they would do their own high split. So, and that's certainly an example too. Next slide, please. And then we'd select our forecast cycle. Next slide, please. And then next comes the interesting part, because we're obviously going to go with the forward. We're going to go with whatever vertical motion we're seeing in the forecast models. We have our location, and then everything else. Usually you're going to go with your default selections. You go with the default selections, and usually that's going to provide you what you need. You can get a PDF file. You can also plot that along your meteorological field. All right, next slide, please. And generally you get something similar to that. Like I said, we provided this with just the direction, the trajectory method, but you can also have it show a dispersion method of how it'll disperse as it goes along. And the chart down below here shows at the height that smoke will travel with distance. So next slide, please. Something else that we have is the special weather statement, and we in Pittsburgh have been doing that only for the past year or so. This is also something where we're getting a situation where we're going to have a dry day, but we're not seeing critical. We're not seeing all 3 match. We're not seeing your low RH. We're not seeing your high sustained winds or gusting winds, and we're not seeing your or we're only seeing 2 of the 3, or we have the fuel moisture and we have the low RH, but we're not seeing the winds. The winds are too light. So this is usually when 2 of those 3 conditions are met. And once again, this is coordinated with the state fire supervisor, and we always do this every time, and we coordinate with them. Most of the time it's a situation where, yeah, it ain't going to hurt to get this out to the public, because you get it out to the public, they see it on our WA map. Everybody goes to the weather.gov page, and they usually see that there, and then they'll look at that and say, hey, today's one of those days where we're going to have really low RH and high winds. So prescribed burning or local burning that people do sometimes in their backyards. I know, being 10 years down in Kentucky, that happens a lot. Somebody just goes ahead and does a little burn in there to get rid of the kudzu in their back hillside, and it gets away from them. It happens. Well, so that's usually used for that. And it's usually a great tool to be used to get the word out to the public too, because they won't come looking for our fire weather forecast. They'll see it when they go to the WA map on the National Weather Service page. Next slide, please. And this will be very similar. looking like it'll just be our counties. We just use the fire weather zones, which in Southwest Pennsylvania, we use our counties, and it'll just be something simple, enhanced fire danger day today. We have dry air and gusty winds in place. So we have our low RHs and we have our high winds, but probably that day we didn't have the fuel moistures after coordinating with the state fire supervisor. Okay, next slide, please. Something else that I wanted to mention. Now, I know there's a lot of text here, but we also twice a day at 2:30 in the afternoon and then 4:30 in the morning, we'll issue the daily fire weather matrix. And it's a fire weather product that gets disseminated and it's used in the National Fire Danger Rating System. And we'll use that to put in there. And everything that goes into that, usually it's just one of the few RAWs that we have across Southwest PA. And it's just very simple. The location, the station identification, time, the date, the weather code expected, the high temperature, wind direction, wind speed, the lightning activity level, relative humidity. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here. So the 24-hour maximum temperature, 24 minimum temperature forecast, max and min RH, and the hours of precipitation. And also if there's a wet flag for that period of time. And it'll just be a bunch of text there, but that data gets used and gets coded into the fire danger rating system. So that's all I have for that. Next slide, please. And then also this is more of the Allegheny County Department of Emergency Management, but I'm sure that they do get the information, a lot of information from the state agency as well. But this will be issued by the PA Emergency Management, and we get it in Pittsburgh too, still even today. Some of the times over the past couple of years, actually, we've had winter lasting a little bit longer on the western side of the Appalachians there. And we'll actually have some days where the air quality will be in the orange area. So because of the winter, because of the colder air lasting a little longer, we'll have those aversions last a little bit longer in the day. And then your normal pollutants that what we see with the local industries that are still in the Pittsburgh area will still get enough to get a barely an orange day. So an orange code level. And then next slide, and this is what it'll look like. Just something similar, just like this. The forecast for Tuesday in Liberty Clarion area is code yellow, which is moderate. It means that people usually is sensitive to air pollution, may be mildly effective, and the primary pollutant will be the fine particles. And they send it to us because we have the NOAA weather radio, and we can send that out to our transmitters that we maintain, and it'll get out to everybody that needs to get out to, and they'll hear it over the radio. Next slide, please. So this is just something really simple, but I wanted to emphasize one point here. So in the Weather Service, this is how we create our products. We do it in a gridded format. It'll look like this. And we only have the ability to do it within hourly increments. So at the very top, you'll have RH there. That's what I have highlighted here. In fact, I believe I highlighted the max RH. But we use it in the hourly format. We do everything from Lavori, ADI. Fire sealing is just your sealing in fire weather. And then we'll have mixing height, the Haynes index, lightning activity level, the transport winds, your 20-foot winds, min and max RH, and then also your wind. And we also have one for red flag conditions when they're met. But what I wanted to hammer home here is if you look on the map here, you'll notice it's a little pixelated. You can see the lower RH as you go up along the Laurel Range right here. These are like 2.5 kilometer resolution. So when you look at these, you're seeing an average of a value in our forecast. So when that's put into our forecast, it's an average of that entire pixel. So what that pixel may be, that pixel may include like 2 ridges or 2 ridges and 2 valleys. So you're going to see an averaged amount. So it helps to understand that, because when we create our products, it's just taking that average of that pixel. So when it shows you that, it's showing you that. So that's why the spot forecasts are so important, because we can take that information and we can infer it based on what we're seeing, and we'll know the biases of the models, or we'll know, hey, based on what we've seen in the profile, what's above that inversion that was mentioned earlier, that's a lot more drier air up there, and that drier air and that stronger wind is going to mix to the surface when our surface warms up. So when our surface warms up, all that air, all that drier air and the higher winds are coming down to the surface. We can include that in the spot weather forecast, and we can tell you, get a better idea what that RH is going to do in the afternoon. So next slide, please. Something else I wanted to touch on is the National Weather Service office in Pittsburgh now, as of 2021, has two IMETs on station. I'm the certified IMET. My counterpart is Michael Brown. He's a trainee right now, and he got out to a fire last year in, I believe it was Clear Creek, Oregon. He was out on that fire as a trainee. We've been trained to provide on-site point weather forecasts for national incidents, and it's not just wildfires. Most recently, we've had IMETs go over to Australia, of course, for wildfires, but we've also had IMETs deployed to hurricane relief. IMETs were deployed to the Deepwater Horizon situation that happened down on the Gulf of Mexico. And then, so those are just the other things we go to, but we also go to prescribed burns. So sometimes if you have a prescribed burn situation that's a little bit complex, you can request an IMET. Contact Larry Van Bussum in NIFC, and he can make that happen. Of course, he has the finer details in that, but yeah, those are everything the IMETs can be used for. There's a situation of a lot of briefings being done, getting out into the field, taking weather observations. Next slide, please. And then just this past March, we go out to Boise at NIFC, and then we have our yearly training done. Last year was the first year for a long time that every IMET across the entire country was sent out to Boise for training, because we had, of course, you had the government shutdowns, you had COVID, and then there was just a lot of things that interrupted us. So we got to get back out there. Of course, practice your fire shelter deployments and practicing with our upper air stations. Every IMET has the capability to launch an upper air sounding and get the data back from that and use that to further help and support the folks on the fire. So next slide, please. And then also what's done out there, we get trained to set up the RAWS stations. So if need be, if the RAWS techs need help, or the fire behavior analyst needs help to go out there and set it up, we can go out there and help them a lot with that as well. Next slide, please. Some of our products that we provide while we're out there, this is just one of them. The weather matrix, providing everything from clouds, average max temperature, precip chance, LAL, but it's not just all that. These are highly adaptable. These values can be changed. The highlights can be changed. The burning condition, criteria can be changed. This is a highly adaptable product, and it can be changed to fit the needs of any operation. So next slide, please. We do practice briefing skills out there as well every year. Pretty much whether it be on the radio or also being up front on the podium and providing briefings in that way as well. Probably one of the most important skills. Next slide, please. And that's all I have. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions if anybody had any. probably the Pittsburgh will continue to have the IMET program at that office for quite a while. So I look forward to working with everybody. Thanks.